Hey, y'all, this is Troy. Today I'm going to be talking about a right wing conservative plot against President Donald Trump and against Israel. And I'm going to be revealing to you the name of this group of conservatives that is essentially plotting, right? So, who are these people, right? But before we get into that, I'm going to give you some of the details up front. We're going to be discussing and kind of exploring the idea of where Charlie Kirk stands when it comes to Trump and Israel and Epstein, things like that. Also, Tucker Carlson as well. Where does he fall on this list, right? Some serious accusations have come out against Charlie Kirk recently on X from a very influential person on the right and somebody with a reputation to lose. Okay. So, are these allegations, these accusations true? We're going to look at that, yes or no. And then also, we're going to be looking into some of the other things that are happening right now in the conservative movement. So here we go. This is something that came out this week, and it actually has to do with what we're going to be talking about a little bit today, but it also has to do with the video that we posted when we very first got this channel started. This is Filibusted. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe if you like this content. But this article says Secret Service suspended 6 personnel without pay or benefits after Trump assassination attempt. This is July 11th, 2025. So a lot of people are saying, well, finally, we're seeing some results, right? With the Secret Service, the FBI, these different organizations that were a part of this, protecting the president, or the presidential candidate during this speech, during this rally, right? And a lot of people are waiting for accountability to take place. So here's some of the actual details. 4 days shy of the anniversary of July 13th, they announced that 6 Secret Servicemen have been temporarily suspended without pay or benefits, and that's going to range from 10 days to 42 days, depending on the individual. So in an independent review by the Department of Homeland Security, they showed a series of law enforcement breakdowns had created an environment that left Trump vulnerable to a would-be assassin. So they're not saying anybody was necessarily, involved in a plot or something like that, but that they weren't necessarily doing their job right. There was negligence taking place. The Secret Service director at the time, Kimberly Chattel, I'm not sure how to say that. She actually resigned 10 days after the shooting. So obviously something was not working right. She probably knew she was going to be in hot water, just went ahead and resigned. If y'all want to see the episode we did all about this, it's called New Evidence. Whistleblower says Shapiro plotted against Trump in assassination attempt. Very, very interesting theory here and allegations coming from specific people online. We dive into that and the possibilities there. So that's available on Filibusted on YouTube. Let's jump into this idea of today, though, of this plot against Trump that expands to a plot against Israel. And essentially, it's kind of a breakdown of a lot of the things that the MAGA movement stands for, and a lot of the things that conservatives have traditionally stood for as well. Things that Donald Trump, when he was running, not just for 2016, but also 2020, 2024, the things that he pulled out of the individuals who consider themselves right-wing or consider themselves to have traditional values here in the States, right? Things that he appealed to. So what is this group I'm talking about? This group that's plotting against Trump, against Israel, I'm talking about opportunists. So sorry for those that are disappointed, but we are going to talk about Charlie Kirk and Tucker Carlson today and look at, are they opportunists? What does that mean? There's a word. A opportunist is a person who exploits circumstances to gain immediate advantage rather than being guided by consistent principles or plans. So who are they? We're going to talk about some potentials today, some people that are potentially opportunists. But essentially, this is somebody who, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, they're not going to choose what's best for their country or for the people of the United States. They're going to choose what's best for them. And if they have to betray what they've traditionally stood up for in order to get themselves to the next level, they're going to do that. That's an opportunist, political opportunist. Opportunity knocks, right? It's always knocking. We've seen some people switch sides in some senses when it comes to these here's the opportunities that have happened this year, right? The tariffs, the ICE raids, the Iran strike, the big bill, now Epstein. Now, am I saying that Trump made the right move when it comes to all these different things? No, I'm not saying that. We would have to literally break down every single thing, and we'd have to wait a few years to see how all these different things play out. I'm not saying he always makes the right move. Maybe not, right? But here's the thing. I don't need a perfect commander in chief. As a United States citizen, I need somebody to be competent, consistent, and I need someone who's devoted to the rights of the American people and the liberties that we uphold in this nation. Now, I believe Trump is trying to do those things. I don't think he's doing it perfectly. Do I think he's got all the right motivations all the time? Not necessarily, but I think he's doing a pretty good job for what he's got to work with. Okay, here's the truth. The media will take advantage of every opportunity to destroy his reputation. Why? We've got to remember this. We've got to remember something. A lot of people really hate Trump. Okay, now that does not justify Trump, everything he does and says, right? A lot of people really hate him, but also the media wants to control the narrative. We've got to remember that. Think back to 2020. The media wants to have control, and they're going to take the opportunity to pull the reins back in any way possible. Now, that doesn't mean we just lay down and let somebody steamroll over us and do whatever they want, right? That's not what I'm saying. Even if they're on our side or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. But we've got to remember what happened in 2020. I'm not saying there wasn't any threat in 2020. People really lost their lives. There really was a real threat. But the media's lies and scare tactics were very misplaced. And I think a lot of people look back now and have a different view than they had at first when the news first came out about the pandemic and all that. And a lot of what was being shared and said caused some people to make decisions that now they look back and they say that was not the ideal decision. Okay, so just to bring to your memory and to my memory the idea of where the media lies a lot of the time, right? I'm not here to defend Trump. He doesn't need my defense. I would say with all these issues, just go do the research for yourself. Look at the facts. We've covered a lot of these things here on this channel. We've brought our perspective, our opinion. We can agree to disagree if we need to. That's fine. I'm not here to defend anybody, but I'm here to say you make up your own mind. And what I am here to bolster is critical thinking, but also a call back to, hey, these are the principles I believe in. These are the values I believe in. I'm going to stand up for those no matter what. And so let's look at the facts today, because I want to ward off emotionalism and the media hive mind. And this is what happens. Any opportunity they get, they go, okay, now everybody jump ship and do this, do that. And again, I'm not telling you what to think or where to land, but my encouragement would be, let's look at the facts. Some serious accusations have come out against Charlie Kirk. And by the end of this video, you're going to know my opinion on him, where I currently stand, all of that. But one of the accusations has to do with Tucker Carlson. Okay, so he recently had, if you don't know, Turning Point USA is a organization co-founded by Charlie Kirk. They had 5,000 young conservatives, and I think there were some older conservatives in the room as well. Not all young people, but mostly young people at this event on July 11th to 13th. It was a student action summit in Tampa, Florida. It was hosted by Charlie Kirk, and they brought in a whole host of individuals. So I'm going to bring up some of those people right here. Student Action Summit. Here we go. You got Charlie Kirk, Pete Hegseth, if I can say the name, Kristi Noem, Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump Jr., Megyn Kelly, all these different people. You got other people on the list that I found interesting. You've got Russell Brand, Dr. Ben Carson, Brett Cooper, Michael Niles, all these different people. And then you have some people that people are not too happy about. Tucker Carlson being the one. There's a lot of people. Now, you might like Tucker Carlson, you might not. So I'm going to be speaking to hopefully both audiences today. But he's one of the people that people are upset about. The other one is Dave Smith down here. There's this debate happening between Josh Hammer and Dave Smith. So a lot of people got really upset some people got really upset that Dave Smith was on the list, specifically because he has been very anti-Trump recently, and actually has called for Trump's impeachment, I believe, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so let's start with Tucker Carlson. Let's see what he said at this event, and we're gonna judge what he said and what he's currently, quote unquote, preaching, for lack of a better word, and see, does he make it on this list of conservatives that are opportunists, the ones that are ready to jump ship when it comes to Trump, ready to jump ship when it comes to things like Israel, ready to jump ship maybe even when it comes to things like traditional family values. Let's see. Let's just let's dig into this pot a little bit and see what he said, right? All right. Jeffrey Epstein allegations. So you got Tucker Carlson. He's got, man, I love this. I'm going to pull the volume down. I love his intro, for one thing. Like him coming on stage, he acts like he's never walked on a stage before. And he's just like, wow, oh my goodness, whoa, So I love that. And that has nothing to do with anything, but I think it's hilarious. He's definitely got stage presence. He pretends like he's never seen fireworks before. And they're like Tucker Carlson. Everybody goes wild. Okay. But what does he say? Let's look at some of his talking points from this speech. Okay. And this is, again, hosted by Charlie Kirk. One of the things he alleged is that Jeffrey Epstein may have been running a blackmail operation for Israeli intelligence. And he suggested in this speech that there's more evidence to come. The crowd went nuts as soon as he said that. Epstein's on everybody's mind right now. Everybody wants answers. We're all asking the question, why? Where did the files go, if they existed at all that kind of stuff, right? What's happening with Pam Bondi, with all the different things that are happening right there? What is Trump doing about it? All that stuff. So here's the truth about this. This has been a theory, this Epstein Israeli intelligence theory and the whole CIA theory. It's a theory that's been out there for a while, but we're still waiting for hard evidence. That's the truth. So if hard evidence is forthcoming, then I would say that 100% justifies what Tucker's saying here. If it's not, and if he had no idea whether any extra evidence was coming or not, then I would say he's just working the crowd. Okay. So it could either go one of two ways. There was one investigative journalist that wrote a book or something like that. At one point, she got a lot of testimonies from people. She even had quotes from Epstein himself claiming to be part of the CIA. And I don't think he specifically mentioned Israeli intelligence, but there were testimonies from other people talking about Epstein being connected to Israeli intelligence. So there's no hard evidence beyond the testimonies themselves, but that is something, right? The testimonies do come into play, and that is part of looking at all the evidence. So there's that. I'm interested to see if what Tucker Carlson said during this speech will actually hold up, and if there is more evidence to come. Because here's the thing. We got people like Candace Owens who are willing to, not only has she kind of jumped ship on some certain issues completely, but she's willing to go all the way over into a spot, I think a little too far, into places where there's not evidence for something. And she's going off of a lot of, suspicions, a lot of presumptions. And listen, you might like Candace Owens, you might not like her. I agree with some of the things she says, but a lot of the things she's been saying lately have got me scratching my head. Okay. And so, there's the problem. The problem lies in, am I a political opportunist who's going to tell the people what they want to hear because Epstein's a huge debacle right now. Everybody wants answers, right? But was he really pointing to answers he knows coming down the line, or was he just trying to get the crowd worked up? That's my question, right? Another thing he talks about is the Epstein cover-up and the government mistrust right now. He expressed distrust in the government's response to questions about Epstein, comparing it to dismissive tactics used by previous administrations, and he called for accountability, especially regarding the elites. Okay. Generally speaking, I agree with that. I think that's a good point. But there's also another angle to that story that we covered yesterday. Doug Smith actually talked about another angle and the potentially coded message that Trump posted having to do with Epstein. Very, very interesting stuff. Y'all go check that out if you haven't. But whether or not Tucker is right in what he's saying here or not really depends on what's happening behind the curtain, and that's yet to be seen. Okay, so how that plays out is, again, going to either give Tucker a thumbs up or a thumbs down when it comes to these comments. But here's another thing he said. Criticism. He criticized conservative priorities. So here's where it starts to get a little more interesting. Okay. Well, not that Epstein wasn't interesting enough. But Carlson criticized conservatives for focusing on what he called, quote unquote, fake wins. Okay. He said, let's quit focusing so much on fake wins or superficial cultural victories. So here's where I think Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk probably split ways a little bit. Why? Because Charlie Kirk is very focused on cultural victories. He's very focused on the cultural beliefs, the traditional family values, things like that. Tucker Carlson, not so much, right? But then one of the fake wins he mentioned was keeping boys off of girls' sports teams. Okay, so we've seen that up in the news. The boys girls bathroom thing, that's been huge in the news. These are cultural issues that really, really matter to a lot of people. Now, it depends on which side of the aisle you're on, how much they matter, but I mean, even both sides deeply, in some ways care about these issues, certain people on both sides. And especially if you have traditional family values and you care about protecting young people, you're going to have a very strong opinion about this, right? I do. But he argued that these are minor issues compared to things like urban decay, drug overdoses, and then I quote, and cities that smell like weed and halal food. So he's talking about some of the other issues that conservatives are addressing today. So I don't think this is a fake win. I'm just going to say that. I think Tucker's off on this one. I don't know let me know how you feel about it in the comments, but I think he's off on this one. I'll just be honest. Okay. Because I think a cultural victory can be just as much of a victory as a practical victory when it comes to things like, hey, fixing the economy, urban decay, fixing the major cities, the drug overdose problems, all these different things. These are things we need to address as a culture. But when as a culture you have an ideology that's off, it can systematically affect every single other practical policy that's being created, that's being enacted. What do I mean by that? Well, the boys on girls sports teams has to do with sexual identity, and it has to do with gender identity, right? It also has to do with ideologically, can I as a human being choose what I am, what I biologically was born as? Can I choose that? And if you are on the side where you say, well, yes, and you can choose whatever you want, nowadays we have students, we have kids that are struggling with believing that they are a cat, they are a dog, all these different things. And it's like, this is a very different world we're living in than we were 30 years ago, especially 50 years ago, right? Even 10 years ago. It's a very different world. And so Tucker Carlson calling this a fake win, right? Keeping boys off of girls sports teams. I think he's going too far. I think that's a stretch, because that issue and that belief, that pattern of saying, yes, you can identify as whatever you want, that's going to affect everything, because what it's doing is it's looking at reality and it's dismissing it and saying reality doesn't matter anymore. Biology doesn't matter anymore. Whatever we say is now the truth, right? And so it's addressing the results of that ideology within the culture. And I think that's a very important thing to address. Now, as a Christian, I'm going to do that in a loving way. I'm not going to do that in a way where I hate an individual or where I mistreat an individual, but I'm also going to do it in a way where I stand up for truth and I stand up for the rights of those who can't stand up for themselves, like these girls on these sports teams. Okay. Trump administration critique. Here's the next thing that Tucker mentioned. He expressed frustration with the Trump administration for not delivering on campaign promises and focusing on foreign policy issues like military actions in the Middle East instead of domestic challenges. I'm just going to say this up front. I would like to see the Trump administration focus less on foreign policy issues like military actions in the Middle East and more on domestic challenges. I agree with that. I would like to see that happen personally. That's just my personal opinion. But I am not going to throw out everything that Trump has done so far and say that he's not delivering on campaign promises. Because if you look at the pattern of presidents in the past, Trump has done more that he said he was going to do than anybody else before him. Think about how hard it is. I mean, even Tulsi Gabbard, or however you pronounce her name, Doug talked about this yesterday. She was at this event, and what did she speak about? She spoke about the fact that the Trump administration is fighting the deep state every single day just to get things done. And with all of those challenges, somehow Trump's been able to deliver on more campaign promises than any president before him. So I think that Carlson is, again, crossing a line here, and he's not looking at this through the right lens. Although I agree with part of what he's saying here. Okay. The last thing he talked about was free speech and journalism. He spoke about the importance of free speech, particularly in the context of journalism. And this is an interesting point because, again, he's advocating for journalistic freedom and fairness. And I agree with him generally speaking, but this raises another point. Why was Tucker invited to this conference? Why was he invited to this event when we all know how controversial he is right now? Now, he's not as controversial as someone like Candace Owens. Obviously, she was not invited. Makes sense, right? And again, I'm not against everything Candace Owens says or everything she's ever said, but a lot of the things she's been saying lately have been causing me to scratch my head again and go, well, where'd you get that from? That doesn't seem like it fits in this world of reality. It doesn't fit with the facts, right? And so not sure what's happening there, right? Not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not going to condemn her completely, but I'm just saying, hey, people are asking questions, right? Same thing's happening with Tucker Carlson, not to the same extent, but with him being so controversial and him willing to publicly critique the Trump administration so hardcore here, and I would say to a fault. Now, I think it's okay to critique the Trump administration, and we do that on this channel. If they do something we don't like, or something that we think that they shouldn't be doing, or something that doesn't align with traditional values, or it doesn't align with what they said they were going to do, we're going to bring it up, right? But I think Carlson is going way past where he should go. And so my question would be, why was he invited? Why did Charlie Kirk sign off on everybody that got invited? Probably at least knew about it and could veto it, right? I mean, considering his public image right now, let's look at I don't have it pulled up, but I'm going to pull it up because it's important. I'm going to pull this up. All right, y'all ready for this? I'm not going to jump over there yet. Transcript. This came out today. Tucker Carlson's harsh new takedown of Trump rattles MAGA. All right, considering where he's at when it comes to Trump right now, and how supportive Charlie Kirk has been of Trump in the past and the MAGA movement to an extent, with his own criticisms, and I think that's rightfully so. Like, we should be allowed to support a movement without and be allowed to critique it fairly at the same time, right? But why was he invited? Here's the thought. Was this a political stunt? Was this conditioning? A lot of people have been saying Tucker for 2028. Okay. My question to Charlie Kirk is, are you on this train? Are you on the Tucker for 2028 train? That's my question. And if so, I think Charlie Kirk's got some explaining to do. Now, I'm not saying this. I'm saying this as a suspicion, right? I'm saying this as a question to Charlie Kirk. Why was he at this event? And is that the reason why? Because here's the problem. Here's the problem right here. Tucker Carlson is traditionally a journalist, right? All about free speech, right? And that's what he talked about here. He said he spoke about the importance of protecting free speech. We have to protect free speech. But the problem is, if Tucker Carlson in his own mind is already running for president 2028, he's not a trusted journalist anymore. I'm going to say that again. If Tucker Carlson has already decided in his own mind he's going to run for president in 2028, he is not a trusted journalist anymore. He's a politician. And those two things cannot be the same. It can be one or the other, not both. Why? Because politicians say what they need to say in order to get elected. And if he's already decided he's running for 2028, guess what he's doing even at events like this right now? He's already saying what he needs to say in order to steer that train towards that 2028 win. That's the truth. So when he talks about the importance of free speech, he can talk about it generally, and I agree with him 100%. But we have to keep in mind where he's actually looking when he's talking about this stuff. What is his plan, right? So what are the Charlie Kirk accusations? Let's get into this. Y'all make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Doug, let me know if there's any point you want to jump in. You ready to jump in now? Awesome. All right, Doug's going to join me. This is going to be good. We're going to have a discussion about this. I'm going to read off these allegations. There is a conservative influencer. She's got a huge following, and she has been making some trouble for Charlie Kirk, and specifically through a X post. So, Doug, you're muted. You're going to have to unmute yourself. Yeah, man, thanks for joining me. I'm excited about this. Any thoughts so far, Doug, before we jump into these specific allegations against Charlie Kirk?
As you were talking about Tucker Carlson, I couldn't help but think of when he was saying the thing about like all the things that need to be fixed right now, right? He saying that the family value stuff is not the main point, and we need to fix like drugs in the streets and all of that. Well, I would like to point our viewers to just go, like I said, well, I think yesterday, I don't know, the days run together anymore, but I go to Kash Patel's official FBI X account and look at all the things they've been doing. Everything that Tucker Carlson said we need to be focusing on more is being done right now.
Right.
More than it ever has been before. So I'm not sure why he thinks that's a good base to run, because like by the time, like if it truly is a campaign strategy, by the time we get to 2027, when we're really starting to think about it, that this is going to be a done deal. Like, well, not completely executed. You know what I mean? But like, I don't think it's going to be as much of a big topic as he's saying it is right now. So I just think he's kind of shooting himself in the foot with that one.
I think you're right. The stats are going to be very clear by the time we get there. We'll be able to statistically look at what this administration has done to fight drug overdoses and human trafficking and all these different issues that previous administrations failed to do. Like, it's going to be very, very clear. And it's because of, and again, I would, like Doug said, go look at Kash Patel, not his personal X account, but his official government X account. Go look at the things, because they're always reporting on the things that they are already doing. The problems are already, the things are busting right now. The problems are already solving. So there's that. And I think it's very, very critical for people to realize that it's not just the stuff that's in the media that the Trump administration is doing, but it's all the stuff that the media is not reporting on as well. And you've got to actually look at the White House briefings and all in the releases and all that kind of stuff to see what stuff is actually being taken care of. I think that's
they're technically reporting on it, but it's like so buried you can't find it, and that's why he puts it on that account, because it's like you can't just go into Google and type up what is the FBI doing with like for drugs. Like you can, and you'll get some stuff, but you're not going to get all of it. There's a bigger story, and it's bigger than I think people realize.
Right. No, you're 100% right. So let's move on to Charlie Kirk. All right. This is Laura Loomer. Now, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she posts about 40 different things a day on X. Maybe she had a slip up. Maybe she had a moment of mental, like breakdown or something. She just decided to post this because she thought, I'll say this, Doug. You and I had a conversation last week or earlier this week where I was on X so much. I took a week off from X and I just got back on today. I took 7 days off. And the reason is because I was on it so much that I was getting so heated over all these different topics that I didn't even realize I was getting mad about both sides of the same issue. And because I heard it from one side and then I heard it from the other. I'm like, yeah, that's right. And then I'm like, yeah, that's right. And then I realized, like, wait a minute, I'm about to post two contradictory X statements.
Yeah.
Because I'm being tossed, here and there by the wind. I'm being blown by the wind, like because of the emotionalism and the hive mindset. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've got to take a step back and look at what are my values and stick to that. What are my principles? I'm gonna stick to that, and I'm not gonna get like blown around, right? And that's kind of what she's trying to do. But I'm wondering if she's right about Charlie Kirk or not. Let's look at what this is. Laura Loomer. She has 1.7 million followers on X. She is an independent journalist. She is an avid Trump supporter, and she's kind of a polarizing social media figure. If you just scroll down on her account, you see her like chatting back and forth with Benny Johnson. Benny Johnson is replying to her. So she's pretty dang popular, right? Let's move on to what she said about Charlie Kirk. This was actually posted on July 13th. So just 2 days ago. She said, I don't ever want to hear Charlie Kirk claim he is pro-Trump ever again. Whoa, that's some harsh language. After this weekend, she's talking about this summit that he just hosted with Turning Point USA. After this weekend, I'd say he has revealed himself as a political opportunist. There's that word, what we're talking about. And I have had a front row seat to witness the mental gymnastics these last 10 years. Lately, Charlie has decided to behave like a charlatan, claiming to be pro-Trump one day while he stabs Trump in the back the next. We're going to look into that, if he's really stabbed Trump in the back or not. TPUSA, if that's how you say it, was only able to thrive thanks to the generosity of President Trump. On the 1-year anniversary of the assassination attempt on Trump's life, Charlie hosted comic Dave Smith at TPUSA's SAS conference, where Dave Smith was able to speak to a bunch of conservative youth at an organization that claims to be pro-Trump. 3 weeks ago, Dave Smith called for President Trump to be impeached and removed from office over his decision to blow up Iran's nuclear facilities. Charlie has played both sides of the Iran issue on his show as we all saw, because he wants to play to both sides of the aisle. The honorable thing to do is to have a position and actually defend it to the death instead of flip-flopping. So this is her allegation against Charlie Kirk. And she's upset, obviously. You've got a lot of different – let me show you some of these what do you think about this, Doug? And then what I want to show is some of the audience's responses to this, some of the followers' responses. And then I want to show what Charlie Kirk actually said at this event with Dave Smith, as he's bringing Dave Smith out on stage, what he actually says and how I think it kind of speaks to this issue. So what do you think?
First of all, I always try to encourage everybody to be very wary when you see rhetoric that is extreme. And Laura Loomer might have some good points, and she is a good journalist. I won't deny that. But when concepts are represented with extreme language, like stabbed in the back and stuff like that, I like to be a little bit more literal, just because, especially like from a journalistic perspective, you don't want to sway people's opinions on the facts of what actually happened. And so at that point, you have to define, like, okay, well, what do you mean by stabbed in the back? You can't explain it in an X post. So did he just say something that he didn't like that Trump was doing, or did he quite literally turn against Trump all the way? Because those are two different things. So what are we talking about here? So it's a red flag for me when people use language like that, because it's very evocative, like emotionally evocative, and I don't like that very much. I want you to just tell me what happened, and I'll make my own decisions on how I feel about it. And so that's a red flag, first of all. But second of all, she probably is still making a good point somewhere in here. You just have to kind of wade through the emotional language mess to find out what that is, and most people won't do that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you, Doug. I think there's two ways that she could have gone about this that would have been better, even if she honestly believes she's justified completely in what she's saying. One would be what you said, is more journalistic and not so much emotionalism and just try to sway the audience with these different phrases, but instead, here's the facts of what happened. You make up your mind. The other side would be a public appeal to Charlie Kirk. I mean, because she tags him here,
right,
but she's not making an appeal to him from one conservative to another. She's attacking him.
That's
I don't
true.
ever want to hear Charlie Kirk claim he's pro-Trump ever again. I mean, his only response to this is to defend himself, not to actually explain himself. That's different. And not to bring the facts. It's like, it's just very different. And automatically she's created an enemy, instead of creating a bridge between a friend. And that's what we need. We need more people that are building bridges in the conservative movement than people creating more enemies. We've got enough of those. Okay.
Yeah.
So here, that's my thought. That's my first thought. But let me look at some of the stuff that was actually said in response. Some people agree, and they bring up Charlie's fence sitting during the Trump-DeSantis primary showdown. So if you think back to the primary where Trump versus DeSantis, who's going to be running for president, right on the conservative side of the ticket. And some people said Charlie was fence sitting then, and he's fence sitting now again. We're seeing the same thing take place. So some people said that. Some people disagreed with her, saying Charlie is just defending free speech. We're going to look into that specific comment in a second. Some people said Charlie's reading the room. This one I think is very interesting. I think there's some truth to this. Charlie is reading the room, considering young conservatives who feel differently about Trump than some of the older crowd. So what do you think about that, Doug?
Sorry, my dogs are barking. I got kicked outside, and so there's background noise. And how dare my neighbors come out of their house, according to these dogs. I think they're done now. But anyway, okay, so the fence sitting, right? Here, originally I kind of was a little bit, I wouldn't say anti-Charlie Kirk, but definitely held him at arm's length because of some of the ways that he has talked to people, like those, what are those things where like they sit outside and they're like, ask me any question, that
public debates, on campuses.
Yeah, I've seen those before, and I've seen a few where people actually brought up legitimate things and posited facts, and he shut it down. And I was like, well, that's not cool, but he's just a good debater. So I don't like that. But at the same time, this rhetoric against him for how he handled the TPUSA, I something clicked for me this morning when I was looking at it, and I was like, I might upset some of our more Christian base here, but I guess I'm just gonna have to go there. I was like, I wonder when this guy was born, because regardless of, like, I don't study astrology or anything crazy like that. Like, I don't believe in it in a weird ethereal way, but I do think that our astrological science influence us in one way or another, just because God created this earth and he created the celestial realms around it, and it affects us in one way, right? And I was like, I think he might be a Libra, and the reason I think that is because I am a Libra. And then it just kind of got me thinking, what people who are born in that area tend to do? They tend to look at things from both sides of the spectrum, not because they're trying to be an opportunist, quote unquote, but because they actually want to see both angles, and they're mediators. They like to come into the middle and find the truth of what they're looking for.
So you're talking about him being a mediator. Yeah, you're definitely about to start a comment war in the chat between the people that will refer to the signs and that won't. And I'll be on the other side of that fence, Doug. I'm not even going to look into it. Not going to touch that stuff. So there we go. Y'all can figure that out in the chat. But I agree with you because I mean I would look at it. So like there's a lot of different examples of that. The personality breakdowns. There's the Enneagram, which also can be very controversial in the Christian audience or not. But it's another way of looking at the different personalities, how they respond to certain things, how they, process information, all that kind of stuff. And what you're saying is Charlie Kirk is a mediator. That's essentially what you're saying.
In a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason, probably the bigger point behind that is I saw some of myself in him because I do that same thing. And it caused me to have a little bit more empathy because I was like, oh, if you look at this from a different perspective, you see that he's not necessarily sitting on a fence because he doesn't want to make a decision. He's sitting on a fence because he's observing both sides to figure out what's the where the grass is green in both areas. Because it's never just as simple as the grass is dead on one side and the grass is green on the other. It's, well, there's patches of green over here and there's patches of green over there. And then there's dead patches in between. Where are they all at? And what am I really looking at here? And how can I get people to see it from this perspective? He could be doing that. And I simply say that because that's something that I like to do. And so I was like, oh, I get it.
I think that's a good point, and I think that's what this one comment said, like Charlie's reading the room. He's looking at the young conservatives. And I think he's looking at the difference potentially between the older conservatives and their traditional or the majority's view of Trump, Israel, things like that, and the younger conservatives and their majority view of those same topics. And he's saying, how do we bridge that gap? And how do we not lose the young conservative audience? That's one of the questions he's probably asking in his mind, right? There may be some other motivations there, but I like this response. And then we're going to get into why she's so upset. Dave 8X7B on X said his response to Laura Loomer's post, pot and kettle about political opportunity. It's stupid to expect unwavering loyalty to a person and not what that person does. If a person you like does something bad, then you don't support them anymore. That's how it should be. So I would agree with that to an extent. I could say I could still support someone to an extent, but I'm not going to support everything they do if they're doing something bad, right? I think that's a very good point. So getting back to this post, why is she so upset that Dave Smith was invited, right? Well, it's because Dave Smith is a libertarian and anti-Trumper, called for Trump's impeachment recently, and she's essentially saying Charlie Kirk is playing both sides of the fence. But let's look at the context that he was invited in, okay? Let's look back at this image that we showed earlier. Down here, you've got Josh Hammer and Dave Smith debate. So Charlie Kirk acted as a mediator, like you said, Doug, and he moderated this debate between Josh Hammer and Dave Smith. And this debate had to do with Israel and a lot of the different views on a lot of the different things that are happening right now. So I want to jump into that. So let's come down here and look at this. If I can find it. That's another. We might get back to that. I'm going to just come right here. All right. No, we're going to all the way here. If I can. Found it. Full Josh Hammer versus Dave Smith debate on Israel. So here's what's interesting. Okay. Charlie Kirk stands on Israel, has been, historically speaking, a lot of vocal support for Israel, and it's been evidenced by his organization's initiatives, including defending Israel's right to exist. He's done a lot of pro-Israel things over the years, taking a lot of students to Israel, a lot of trips to Israel. He's done a lot of things pro-Israel on college campuses, things like that. But he was accused of critiquing Israel's actions in Gaza during this summit. So people specifically accused him of critiquing Israel's actions in Gaza, particularly in response to Dave Smith's claim that supporting Israel's actions in Gaza contradicts pro-life values. So that was something that Dave Smith brought up. He appealed to the pro-life movement, the pro-life ideology, which I agree with, pro-life, right? And that's one of those things. And I love that I said this because I wanted to say this today. If my favorite political candidate or conservative leader suddenly became very anti-pro-life, guess what? I'm throwing them in the trash. Why? Because it's one of the issues and one of the principles I'm going to stand on no matter what. And I'm not going to be so loyal to the person that I won't be loyal to the principle, that I won't be loyal to the belief. So that's one thing. And I think it kind of reflects what this person has said in this expose. But so people have accused Kirk of kind of being wishy-washy when it comes to Gaza because of what Dave Smith claimed. Some ex-posts indicate that Kirk has expressed views distancing himself from unconditional support for Israel's conflicts. What are your thoughts on that, Doug? And then I'm going to give my kind of conclusion to that thought. And then we're going to get into this actual debate.
Can you repeat that last line for me? I was a little distracted with getting the dogs tucked away.
So some people, especially on X, have recently indicated that Charlie Kirk has expressed his views distancing himself from unconditional support for Israel's conflicts. So they're saying he's decided not to be 100% behind every single thing that Israel does. I mean, that's literally what that means.
Well, I mean, I think that I'm kind of right there with him on that. Like, from a biblical perspective, I am in support of Israel because that is like the promised land, all that good stuff, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that I support and agree with every single thing that the government there does. That's a little bit of a different conversation. And so what I think is dangerous is when people 100% are behind things that aren't that like important. So like for me, and like you use the abortion thing or like the pro-choice thing as a stance, like that's a pretty cut and dry thing. And you can be 100% on that one way or the other. But when it comes to something as gray area as Israel and what they're doing and how their hands are dipped into whatever they are, yeah, I'm not going to be 100% on that either, because I don't know everything that's going on there like I can with everything else. So I'm thinking that that's not the worst stance ever. But once again, I don't know exactly what he feels, so I can't say I'm right on board with it either,
Yeah, from my research, my conclusion is that his pro-Israel stance is kind of tempered by nuanced critiques of their specific policies. So he's pro-Israel. He's very pro-Israel. If you actually go look at it, and people saying that he's not, they don't know what they're talking about, because he's very, very pro-Israel in a lot of the things this organization does, a lot of the practical things. But at the same time, he's also very willing to bring specific critiques to specific policies, specific actions that they take. And that's just healthy dialogue. That's healthy critique. Yeah. That's healthy. No matter, if you can't critique your boss, guess what? You're in a very unhealthy working environment. If your boss is slapping you upside the head every time he walks in the room, and you're like, if you can't say, go to HR and be like, my boss keeps hitting me, then what? Like if they go, you can't question your boss, he's your boss. You know what I mean? So it's like, it is that idea of just because you support someone and you're supporting their vision and their mission in a lot of ways does not mean you can't bring healthy critique to the table.
Yeah. Well, and critique is just the fancy way of saying questioning, right. I've got questions and that I obviously don't have answers. That's the number. If you say you have a question, that means you don't have the answer. You're just looking for the answer for something. And so when you bring these questions up against Israel, like, hey, what's going on with this? Here's my critique. Well, that's a question. I want an answer for this. Nothing wrong with that.
Right, exactly. And I think the people that are doing the most support, they actually have the most excuse to bring those critiques, right? Because if somebody that hates you starts critiquing you, you're not going to listen to that. But if somebody that loves you and cares about you and has protected you and defended you and helped you along the way, if they raise a question, you're going to listen to that, right? And I think that's why someone like Charlie Kirk has a right, and some of the other conservative voices who have been very pro-Israel, they have a right to bring nuanced critiques and say, hey, what's happening here? Let's look into this. Let's make sure that, and why? Because we want them to be doing the right thing, right? We want them not just to be protected and to be their, to be their own state and all those things. We want them to be doing the right thing as well. So let's jump into what Charlie Kirk says at the beginning of this debate. And I think this says it all. Okay. So we've got these two guys. One is a Republican. One is an independent, or a, what's the other word? I forget now. Libertarian. He's a libertarian and he's an anti-Trumper. We've got one that's a pro-Trump and pro-Israel. And so then they're debating on Israel. And this is how Charlie Kirk starts this debate. Before he brings them out on the stage, got the chairs right there. This is what he says. He says, a year ago today, our republic was probably saved by just a couple centimeters. Then he says, thanks to the goodness and glory of God that Donald Trump turned his head at that very moment. And then he goes on to do a 10-second moment of silence for the hero, the firefighter who lost his life during the assassination attempt on Trump's life. And in my opinion, I'd say that's pretty pro-Trump, right? Like starting the debate that way, that's pretty pro-Trump. Yeah. So I would say we're checking that box for Charlie Kirk today. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. And then, okay, now let's see about the Israel topic. Okay. We didn't have time to get into Epstein today because we're going so long. I kind of skipped that topic, but we might talk about more Epstein later this week. So, but at least these two things, Trump and Israel, right? Pretty pro-Trump. Let's look at the Israel one. Okay. Charlie Kirk says, our last bit of programming is going to be a debate. Some of my best memories ever are going to Israel, traveling to Israel, seeing where Jesus rose from the dead, Jesus walked on water. And then he goes on to say, some of my greatest experiences have been in the Holy Land and defending Israel. Dang, pretty pro-Israel. And it says he goes on to mention how it's an increasingly hot topic on campuses and with conservatives. So what's he saying there? He's saying, hey, there is a divide that's happening generationally when it comes to the older conservatives and the younger conservatives. And then he says, let's have two people that don't agree on this topic. And then he says, when it comes to these things, Israel, the 12-day war, and sending aid and supporting Israel. Then he says, we as conservatives, we want to have this debate. We don't want to just all of a sudden say, oh, you're not allowed to say that. No, we want to foster an environment where we get to the truth. We want to find the best ideas and have the best ideas win. That's a quote from Charlie Kirk during this intro to this debate. And what are your thoughts, Doug? And then I have one final thought to share, and then we're going to end it.
I think it's interesting that people who are critical of this overlook these things, because when you he set the stage quite literally. He said, here's what we need to do. Here's my goals. Here are my intentions. And I would challenge Laura Loomer to come out against exactly that and tell me what you think about that, because that sounded pretty all right to me. Really made it clear. And I think that's kind of hard to argue with. And what we don't want to do is all of us be in an echo chamber. And so when we're just regurgitating the same things that the other guy said and not bringing on other people to hear their viewpoints, that's what we're doing. We're just sitting in an echo chamber. And so I don't like the things that Dave Smith has said. I don't know the other guy, to be honest. Smith has said some things that are probably fine and other things that are really not cool. Yeah. But that doesn't mean I don't want to hear what he has to say, because I want to know what that side is thinking. And also what people have a tendency to forget is that provides an opportunity for the truth to be exposed. When you let somebody come on, if you really, really have a strong stance in something, then it shouldn't be very threatened by the opposing stance, because if what you're saying and what you believe is accurate, it will not be shaken by that. If it is shaken by that, then you need to really reevaluate what it is that you believe, because apparently you don't believe it very strongly. So why can't we have people come on who are come into the camp and express their opinions who we might not agree with? If you can't do that, that's a sign of weakness, in my opinion, because then you don't have much to stand on. If you
I love that. I love that point about it's a sign of weakness if you're not willing to debate an issue or you're not willing to hear the other side. But also, you talked about how it's answering people's questions. It allows the truth to come forth. And I think that's, in my mind, that's what someone like Charlie Kirk is trying to do. He's thinking about the questions that the students have based on what they've seen online, what they've heard, all the different theories that are out there, all the different angles and viewpoints. And then he's saying, hey, I'm going to let somebody come on stage who's going to bring up that question or that angle or that point that you're thinking of. And then I'm going to have somebody who knows how to answer that question, answer it, right?
And then it gets clarified.
Yeah, exactly. And so that, again, people can, well, number one, make up their own mind. But at the end of the day, if your movement doesn't allow people to make up their own mind and just says, no, just believe what we want you to believe no matter what, listen, you're no better than the media on the left. I'm just going to say that. If you never, ever let people make up their own mind or ask questions, it's like, that sounds a lot like the leftist media who just says, just trust us, believe whatever we say, And it's like, wait a minute, what do you mean just trust you? Like, you were wrong about this other thing. So what, it's like that, it raises a lot of questions. And it's like that, I think he's recognizing that We live in an information age more than ever before. Not that the past generations weren't informed, they were, but there's just so much more information readily available today on the internet than ever before. And so the young generation, the young conservatives that are coming up, they are asking more questions and they have more information at their fingertips and they need more answers. And they need people that are able to answer those questions. So that would be my concluding thought. What do you think, Doug?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the last thing I wanted to point out about Charlie Kirk in particular, and the language that was used against him, I'm a big proponent of trying to look at topics through different lenses just to make sure you understand what you're looking at. And when you say things like political opportunist, my instinct is, well, I need you to define opportunist, because in my opinion, opportunity is a positive thing. And so when you claim somebody as a political opportunist, what are you exactly trying to say is my question. And so if he's an opportunist, well, is he just taking an opportunity and it's a good one? Or is it that he's taking advantage of people in a bad way? That's the question that needs to be answered. And when you use language that's vague like that, and you don't then go on to have a whole lot of evidence for it, or at least you don't point it out, it makes me suspicious. So we need to define words first, define what you mean by opportunist, and then prove it with the evidence. Otherwise, let me know it's your opinion, and then move on. That's all.
We'll see if we get a response from Laura Loomer or not. Probably not, but there's hope. All right, that's our show for today. Thank y'all to everyone who tuned in, and we will see you tomorrow.